We're going to tell you about our journey from becoming just regular eaters to ethical omnivores, and we'll explain what we mean by that and the challenges that we face and solutions for the future. And we both started at pretty opposite ends of the spectrum. Lisa was a vegetarian, and so for her, learning about the food system came out of necessity. She had to think about everything she ate anytime she went out because there just weren't that many options. I, on the other hand, was an unconcerned omnivore. So like most people, I didn't think about what I ate because I didn't really have to. And then I read Eric Schlosser's Fast Food Nation, which if you haven't read it, can be summed up in one statement. There is shit in the meat. This book chronicles the rise of fast food in our country and the industrial meat system that sprang up to feed it. It's a terrifying book, and I told everyone that I met about it. But I didn't change exactly what I ate at that time. It just, it had an effect, but it didn't sink in. The next thing for me was Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma. And this book discusses how the food system relies on, I'm nervous. It relies on a foundation of two things, inedible corn and cheap petroleum. And that's, not very sustainable. And the kicker was Food Inc. And Food Inc. is a movie about the system, really shows what goes on the feedlots and in the slaughterhouses and the harm for the animals, the people involved, and for the land. So not really knowing where to go forward from there, the first thing I did was quit eating fast food, which that doesn't sound like a big deal, but at the time I was a roadie with a country music band and everything we ate was fast food. So it was a big deal to me.
And it was a great first step and a natural first step, and I found it amazing. But I was already a vegetarian, so I was just kind of hanging out. But then, luckily, Christian gave me his copy of The Omnivore's Dilemma, and I read it, and literally, as I got to the end, he was just waiting for me to finish. And when I closed the book, we looked at each other, and we're like, I know, right? We have to quit our jobs and become farmers. And it turns out that's not how most people react to finding out about our food system, but luckily we have each other, and this was okay. And so we did. In 2006, we quit our jobs, and we bought 10.5 acres in Waller County to start a goat dairy. So why a goat dairy? Well, goats primarily because on 10.5 acres, that's about the right sized animal. And dairying because, as we said, I was a vegetarian, and while I'm perfectly fine with other people eating meat, I just could not get my head around raising meat as my job. So dairy. And the other thing was, I was a city girl, you could tell by looking, and it was gonna take a lot to get me out to the country, and Christian lured me there with the promise of something really awesome like making cheese, and I went. In retrospect, it turns out what's totally awesome about it is the goats. That's all anybody needs, but we didn't know. So we did this. We wanted to prove that it was possible to treat food animals with respect, to treat the land with respect, and still make a profit, that we could get out of the system and do this. And with that in mind, we set up our farm to run on a triple bottom line where everything we do, everything ever, runs through a filter of 3 layers. And the first thing we ask of everything is this in the best long-term health interests of our animals? And the second thing is this in the best long-term health interest of our land? And if we've made it that far, number 3 is, can we make money doing this? And while profitability is at the very bottom, it's undeniably important for a couple reasons. 1, this is what we were trying to prove. And 2, we don't have a lot of money, so we couldn't just have a fun exercise of self-righteousness. So as we did this, I'm candid. As we did this, we met a lot of other farmers who were doing essentially the same thing. And while they didn't always articulate it the way we did, there were people out there growing poultry, eggs, which comes from poultry, beeves and pigs and lambs and goats, all on pasture. And that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about ethical meat. We're talking about having animals out in an environment suitable to them, where they're able to do an amount of foraging, which is their nature, and express the other things that are in nature. So if a pig roots, a chicken scratches in dirt and eats bugs, you need to let the animals be the animals they are. But at the same time, you need to give them the stress-free environment of farming. You need to provide shelter and protection from predators and these other things. And these people were doing this, these other people at the farmers markets we met and in our network. And I realized that as a vegetarian, even though they were doing what I said I valued, I wasn't supporting them. And it led me to this huge essential truth that changed a lot about me, and that's that opting out of a crummy system does nothing to change that crummy system. But opting into a better system, that can make change. And I decided I was gonna have to start eating meat. I was gonna have to put my money where my mouth was and my mouth where my money was and eat meat. So I became a frienditarian, which I totally made up. But basically, I will eat an animal that I raised. I will eat my own friends.
Eat that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if it makes you feel better, I did not eat that baby goat. I will also eat meat raised by my own friends who care for the land and the animals in the same way that I think is important. When I buy a chicken, though, I pay between $20 and $26 for a whole chicken. And that's because that's actually what it costs. When you value the animal, and you value the land, and you value the person that is farming in this much more difficult way, it costs about 20 bucks for a bird, maybe more, depending how much it weighs. And my hope and my belief is that by being willing to pay that, not only am I rewarding a farmer for catering to my values, but I might just be incentivizing another farmer to start growing birds that way. Because what we're talking about here is an $18 differential in the price of one single bird. And that money can be a powerful motivator. And I don't care how I pull people on board. Besides opting in, I want to pull people on board, however it happens.
So, as we began to eat this way in our own home, we got to know people, like Lisa said, that were raising sheep and goats and cows and chickens. We realized how small the supply of this meat was. That for a town with 6 million people, the amount of pastured meat that could be produced with the number of people that were doing it, it doesn't even cover. It's a fraction so small, it's not even a number. And the reason for that, I can kind of explain by telling you about my neighbor, Brad. You guys have been out in the country around Houston. You know the cows are out there. So why aren't they on our plate? Well, my neighbor, Brad, has 10 cows on his 10 acres. And that's the norm for our area. Every side of our farm is another farm with 10 cows, 30 cows on it, small family operation. And the USDA census for Waller County says there's between 500 and 900 cattle operations, but you can't get a single pastured local hamburger there. You can't get a hamburger there because there's no butcher shop. There's no butcher shop because there's no USDA slaughterhouse. And the USDA part is really important. You can't buy beef in this country at the retail level that was not slaughtered under the watchful eye of a USDA inspector. So, the calves in Waller County, instead of being processed locally in some small slaughterhouse and winding up on my dinner plate, are sent to the auction barn, where buyers from corn-producing states purchase them and then drive them to where the corn is. They put them in CAFOs, concentrated animal feed operations. You'll note the word farm doesn't appear there. In these CAFOs, these cows are going to be fed corn for a few weeks until they're big enough, and then they'll be walked right across the road to a giant slaughterhouse where they're killed, cut, and wrapped at a rate of 400 per hour. And 400 per hour is where we get 99-cent hamburgers. It's also the thing that destroyed the profit margin for all the small slaughterhouses that used to be in farming communities. They're all gone now. So what that means for our little farm, we raise about 10 hogs every year. We raise them on whey, which is a byproduct of our cheese making. It's a really good feedstock. It makes delicious bacon. You can't tell, but this is a Jewish vegetarian pig farmer. We think she's the only one on our street.
To be fair, I am not a vegetarian anymore, but I'm not eating the pigs. There's a cultural barrier I haven't gotten across yet.
So these hogs cannot be sold as packed cuts of meat, value-added product. They have to be sold whole hog and go to a non-USDA slaughterhouse. Well, the profit margin on those hogs is tiny compared to what bacon or pork chops would get you. And my neighbor's cows face the exact same pressure. So instead of those guys living on pasture their entire lives, being processed right here in our county and winding up on our plate, they get shipped off to a CAFO. And my neighbor and his wife end up having to go to jobs in town instead of earning a middle-class income on the farm that they run.
So it's ridiculous, and it's frustrating, and what can we do about this? I mean, what can we do to bring not just the production back to our communities, but the slaughter aspect and the processing? And in my dream, I have this Herbert Hoover speech where instead of a chicken in every pot, we have a slaughterhouse in every community. This is my moonshot, and it's a crazy-ass moonshot for someone who used to be a vegetarian for 20 years. I admit it. But this is it. This is what I dream of. In my perfect America, oh, sorry, I missed a spot. I'm so nervous. So one way to do this is thinking outside the box, where in this case, we're actually thinking inside the box. This is a mobile slaughterhouse unit, and these exist, right? This is essentially a slaughterhouse that fits on the back of an 18-wheeler and goes from farm to farm processing there. And these are being made for only $200,000, which is significantly less than a brick and mortar investment. And these can be fitted up with an inspector. They are made to code, which we said is important, USDA code. The inspector rides along, and they go from farm to farm processing. In my perfect America, every rural community, every food-producing community would have one of these. When you bring the slaughterhouse to the farm, you reduce immeasurably the stress on animals and on farmers. When you take out of the equation having to load them up and transport them to scary places and unload them and then not make very much money and sell them and load them back up and take them to the CAFO, that's eliminated. When you bring the slaughterhouse to the farm, you also increase profitability and bring jobs back to communities. So suddenly our neighbor Brad can stop selling his cows on the hoof, start making a little more money, and his neighbors like us can have a hamburger that was raised next door. Every organic vegetable farmer that we know raises some amount of livestock as well, because livestock and their manure are a really important part of a sustainable agriculture system. Right now, those animals are really just tools for those farmers, and they can be used to feed their own family. But if we could bring the slaughterhouse to the farm, suddenly those farms have another revenue stream, another way to keep their farm healthy, not just from the manure perspective, but from an economic perspective. And their customers win too by getting to opt in to something they believe in with a farm they already believe in. It's just this amazing thought to me that we could bring back food production and relocalize our food system in such a simple way. Now, slaughter is only part of the equation, but arguably it is the largest barrier now. We already know farmers who have gotten out of the business and sold their farms, meat farmers, because the slaughter was too much of a hassle. So, I mean, if we could do this, we could really talk about relocalizing. And imagine the difference to our food shed if just each of the 7 counties surrounding Harris had one of these. One of these units can process 10 cows in a day, or it can process 24 hogs in a day, or 40 sheep or goats. Imagine getting 10 cows a day out of the CAFO system, and that's just one trailer. That's such a huge start. I don't know if this is the answer, but this is one of the answers. And we can all make a change in this. We can all help relocalize our food system and support this way of eating by opting in to better meat. We can open our wallets and pay what it costs. But beyond that, we can start educating our communities for the need to bring options and solutions like this back into our community. One thing is certain and undeniable, and Kavanaugh touched on this. We need to get farmers and then animals also out of the industrialized food system. It's working for nobody. So, we think this is one of the other things, one of the hard things that's worth doing. At the very least, we think it's worth thinking about, and we're glad you gave us time to do it today. So thanks.